Okay, so Aaron Charles Rodgers is undoubtedly one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, but even though he is unanimously recognized as a top 10 quarterback of all time at least, one harsh criticism still remains. Why didn't he win more Super Bowls in Green Bay? However, although this question is definitely a popular one, is it really a valid critique towards Rodgers' career? Or maybe we've just been looking at Aaron Rodgers incorrectly all along, and well, there's only one way to find out the full truth, and that's by looking back at Aaron's entire tenure with the Packers to find out once and for all how Aaron Rodgers only won a singular Super Bowl with the Green Bay Packers. So, to start this video out, it's time to go all the way back to the 2004 NFL season, where the Green Bay Packers in particular had been led by their Hall of Fame quarterback Brett Favre for the last 12 seasons and counting. And in 2004, the Packers finished the season going 10-6 and were scheduled to host a wild card game against the slightly inferior Minnesota Vikings. The game could not have gone worse, as not only did they lose the game, allowed Randy Moss to drop his ass on their home turf, but the scariest part of this loss was Brett Favre's quarterback play, or I guess lack thereof, as Brett Favre would end up being the main reason the Packers would lose this game, as he logged one of the worst playoff games of his career. Now, at this exact same time, a young lad by the name of Aaron Rodgers, who will eventually blossom into the protagonist of this story, had started to make a name for himself in the college world, as his 2004 campaign with Cal had seriously solidified him as one of the best college prospects available. So with that, we enter the 2005 NFL Draft, where the San Francisco 49ers held the first overall selection and needed a quarterback, and were forced to decide between either Cal's Aaron Rodgers or Utah's Alex Smith. Nobody truly knew who the 49ers were going to take, and when the pick was finally announced, the 49ers drafted Alex Smith, forever altering the career paths for both quarterbacks. Now that Alex Smith had been selected, as people looked down the 2005 draft board, no team truly needed a quarterback until the late first round, which allowed Aaron Rodgers, arguably the second best player in the entire draft, to fall all the way down to the 24th overall pick, where the Green Bay Packers scooped up Brett Favre's successor. So, the dynamic duo that never was formed, and because Brett Favre was just casually the greatest Iron Man in NFL history, Aaron Rodgers was forced to hand Brett Favre water for 3 seasons while gaining some wisdom and knowledge behind a great mentor in Favre, except it wasn't that simple. In the beginning, the relationship between these two GOATs was pretty rocky, as you had Brett Favre saying things to the media like, "My contract doesn't state I have to get him ready to play," making it very clear that Brett Favre was going to focus solely on being the best football player he could be without being a true mentor to a young Rodgers. But even if Brett wasn't exactly the model babysitter, just by being on the sidelines and observing how Brett Favre operates, Aaron Rodgers was able to take some notes and gain invaluable knowledge that very soon would finally pay off on the field. In 2007, the Packers were arguably the best team in the NFC, as they went 13-3 on the season and found themselves in the NFC Championship game against, oh no, Eli Manning and the New York Giants. The game was an emotional roller coaster for both sides, but for Brett Favre, despite being gifted way too many opportunities to win the game, he just couldn't capitalize. And on his last throw ever as a Green Bay Packer, Brett Favre threw an interception in overtime, which led to a game-winning field goal for the Giants. After this embarrassment, Brett Favre decided to hang up the cleats for good, for like 3 days, and then stormed back into the facility and demanded his job back. But at this point, the apprentice had grown stronger than the master, and the Green Bay Packers finally decided that Aaron Rodgers, not Brett Favre, would be the franchise quarterback for the Packers, as they traded Brett Favre away to the New York Jets for good. So here we are, Finally, Aaron Rodgers held the starting job in Green Bay. And although we've seen small flashes of what A-Rod could do, like in their Week 13 game against the Cowboys in 2007, where he dominated with Brett Favre injured, but besides those few and far between moments, nobody really had any idea what to expect from this 25-year-old quarterback who had yet to have a real chance in the spotlight. So as the season began, it was crucial that Aaron Rodgers proved without a shadow of a doubt that the front office made the correct decision moving on from Brett Favre. And in Week 2 of 2008, Aaron Rodgers showed the entire NFL world that he was the new Packers franchise.
Trademark McCarthy spread him out. Touchdown Packers. Backfield. Into the corner. Touchdown Green Bay!
Now, yes, although he did play against the Detroit Lions, but Aaron Rodgers, in just his second ever start, dropped a masterclass of a performance. And as the season went on, Rodgers didn't even slow down at all. As for the rest of the season, in what was effectively his rookie campaign, the man finished his 2008 season going toe-to-toe with some of the best quarterbacks in NFL history. But although Aaron Rodgers was great, his weapons in Ryan Grant and Greg Jennings were also great, his defense was not, as the other side of the ball finished 22nd overall in the league, which helped tank the Packers down to a 6-10 season, keeping them out of the playoffs. And even worse for Aaron, although he quite literally defied every expectation set out for him, Packers fans and the media alike couldn't help but compare him to Brett Favre, who at the same time had a Pro Bowl year with the Jets before a torn bicep derailed his year. So, although Rodgers himself had exorcised the demon in Wrangler jeans from his past mentally, apparently people needed proof on the field that he was a worthy heir to the throne. So, time to run it back. And going into 2009, the Packers added a crucial piece in the draft, selecting a future cornerstone in Clay Matthews, and also the future two-time world champion dance expert BJ Raji, as well as hiring our old pal from the Texans traveling circus in Dom Capers to be the new defensive coordinator. And with that, the Packers' expectations were once again clear. Aaron Rodgers now had talent around him, and he has to prove that he can convert this talent into meaningful wins. And as the season went on, sure enough, this Aaron Rodgers guy is pretty good. But all everyone really cared about was one game. One matchup in Week 8 where Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers would host Brett Favre and the Minnesota Vikings in Lambeau Field. This was it. Everyone was expecting a Western standoff to finally settle this little dispute, and what we ended up getting was actually a little anticlimactic, as Aaron Rodgers played a really great game. I mean, damn near 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no picks is just about as good of a game as you could ask for, but unfortunately, Brett Favre decided to use black magic in this game, and the 40-year-old Favre's de-aging spell ended up working as Brett eviscerated the Packers defense, and the Vikings walked away with the win 38-26. So although this game did sting, the Packers put this game behind them, and after Week 10, the Packers started to click, only losing 2 games as Aaron Rodgers made his first Pro Bowl, while the defense not only started pulling its weight, but pulled the entire team's weight along with it, as Hall of Fame corner Charles Woodson won the Defensive Player of the Year award, anchoring the secondary, all while the Packers were the proud owners of the best run defense in the league, and went into their first ever playoff game with Aaron Rodgers holding the keys against the Cardinals in Arizona. Now, it should be said that right before this battle would take place, just 7 days prior, the Packers actually played the Cardinals in Week 17, where both teams with nothing to play for still chose to let their starters play for most of the first half, and had to pay for that choice, as the Cardinals' 1,000-yard receiver Anquan Boldin suffered an ankle injury that would rule him out for the entire playoffs. And I guess even funnier, Charles Woodson got his shoulder banged up, potentially by diving into the end zone on a completely useless pick six. So with that, the stage was set. Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers versus Kurt Warner and the Arizona Cardinals. One team that was just in a Super Bowl a year ago versus another team that did have experience, but also had a quarterback with almost none. But for some reason, whenever these two teams play each other, as you'll come to see in the future, there is fireworks. Except, to start this game, it looked like we'd be getting a bloody massacre.
Over twice, taking it away only once in this game as Warner buys time and hits Fitzgerald. Woodson had fallen and Fitzgerald has a touchdown.
Yeah, it wasn't looking good for our protagonist early on, as Rodgers' first ever pass attempt in the playoffs was an interception, and it only snowballed from there, with the Cardinals at one point firmly grasping a 31-10 lead over the Cheeseman. At this point, all eyes were on Aaron Rodgers. Was he going to lie down and die in the face of adversity, or was he going to stand up and prove he was great? But come on now, this is Aaron Rodgers we're talking about, and of course he fought back, throwing huge touchdowns and converting fourth downs to eventually, against all odds, tie the game at 38-38. But the Cardinals just wouldn't die either, as both quarterbacks sliced through their opposing defenses, scoring a touchdown each, and after a missed field goal by the Cardinals, this game had to be decided in sudden death overtime. With each offense scoring at will, it seemed like whoever won the coin toss would effectively win the game on the spot, and when the Packers did just that, it seemed like Aaron Rodgers was destined to get his first crucial postseason win as the Packers' starting quarterback. But just when fate seemed to be on Aaron Rodgers' side, he simply failed to capitalize, as Rodgers missed a pretty wide open Greg Jennings, which led to Aaron being strip-sacked by Carlos Dansby to end the game once and for all. So, although this loss definitely hurt for sure, Aaron Rodgers officially showed that he was not only worthy of sitting in the same chair as Favre, but he was a special football player. And being able to stand toe-to-toe with a Hall of Fame quarterback in the highest scoring game in playoff history is nothing to gloss over at all, and you can only be so mad about losing a game where your young quarterback put up well over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Anyways, after that thriller, Aaron Rodgers seemingly had proven himself to the NFL world despite the loss for like the 7th time, with certain groups of people hailing Aaron Rodgers as the best young quarterback the NFL had to offer, but there was somehow still that minority camp of individuals that still needed more. They demanded one more convincing year to finally accept Aaron Rodgers as the real deal. So once more, Aaron Rodgers apparently had more scores to settle, and so did the rest of the Packers team, as going into the 2010 season, the Packers as a whole were stacked, but the defensive side of the ball in particular was close to an all-time great unit, with guys like Nick Collins and Charles Woodson continuing to own the skies, while Clay Matthews and company cleaned up everything else on the field, as the Green Bay Packers finished with the second best defense in the entire NFL, mastering the art of versatility in the process. Now, although the defense was packed to the brim with talent, Aaron Rodgers didn't look like himself to start the season, as for the first 6 weeks, Rodgers wasn't bad by any means, but it was clear that he just wasn't all the way there, throwing more interceptions per game than he ever had before. So now, Aaron Rodgers had to make a choice as to where the season was going, but in a Week 7 matchup, it looked like that choice was going to come to him, as the Minnesota Vikings, led by Brett Favre, came into town once again. In order to become his own man, he had to vanquish the one who overshadowed him for so long, and well, that's exactly what he did, as Rodgers dropped his usual near 300 yards and 3 tutties, while Brett Favre's pick 6 all but sealed the loss for Minnesota. Although this was a turning point for Rodgers and the Packers, as the team would go on to win 4 out of their next 5 games, this success came with a real hefty price, as throughout the season, the Packers just kept having to put their players in body bags, finishing with a league-high 15 players on IR, and worst of all, in Week 14, with their playoff hopes on the line, Aaron Rodgers himself was infected with the disease as well, and missed a crucial game against the Patriots with a concussion. So at this point in the season, all hope seemed lost, and although their team was better than last year's squad, none of it matters if you can't stay healthy and win games, as the Packers, same as the previous season, found themselves just barely inside the top 10 of the official power rankings going into Week 16. But luckily for the Packers, Aaron Rodgers returned and dropped a masterclass on the Giants in a 45-17 win in New York, which set up the most important game of the season to date. All Aaron Rodgers and the Packers needed in Week 17 to make the playoffs was one singular win against their most hated rival in franchise history. These two teams hate each other, and to make things worse, the Bears had beaten the Packers earlier this season, and just for one more cue to the Packers, although the Bears had absolutely nothing to play for, they decided to run with their starters anyway, just to be the ones to personally snatch the Packers season away from them. So with that, the Packers and Bears went to battle, and early on, it was nothing more than a defensive stalemate, as in the fourth quarter, the game was still tied at 3 apiece, until finally, Aaron Rodgers and the offense got something going and scored their first touchdown to take the lead. Rodgers got the job done, and now it was time for the defense to do its part, and sure enough, the defense did just that, as a rare interception from bodybuilding sensation Jay Cutler stamped a playoff ticket for the Packers. They did it! When everyone counted them out, the Packers pulled their season from the grave and instilled some life into it. And now that they were in the playoffs, Aaron Rodgers had to prove that he could win in the postseason with a great supporting cast around him. So, to start their long and grueling playoff journey, the Green Bay Packers started out by outdueling a very talented Eagles team by just a touchdown, and then ramped up their play even more in the divisional round by just butchering the Falcons into microscopic pieces, 48-21, never allowing the game to be close. On the surface, these two games were great, right? I mean, good team wins or whatever, but if you look a little bit closer, someone or something really must have pissed Aaron Rodgers off, because his numbers over this 2-game stretch in the playoffs were just imaginary, and no team had yet to give Aaron Rodgers anything resembling a challenge so far in just his 3rd ever playoff game. And although Rodgers was perfect, other guys stepped up huge for the Packers in the postseason run as well, as rookie running back James Starks ran for a combined 189 yards in just 2 games, and cornerback Tramon Williams racked up 3 interceptions in that same time frame, including the game sealer versus the Eagles. So, with the crucifixion of the Falcons, the Packers then moved on to the NFC Championship game, where, of course, the gatekeepers of the Packers' hopes and dreams were waiting once more. The Chicago Bears stood in their way again, and this time, they were really angry. Because the Bears had won the division, Chicago didn't have a wildcard game to play, and in their divisional matchup, they easily handled the Seahawks, ending the game in the first half. So while the Packers were still injured and have basically been in playoff mode since Week 15, the Bears barely had a single scratch on them, and sure enough, not only was Chicago not ready to start the game, but the entire duration of this duel was an utter disaster.
They fake it to Cohen, and Rodgers will take it to the edge. Touchdown!
This game almost couldn't have gone any worse, as Bears fans had to watch Caleb Haney replace a bored Jay Cutler and a benched Todd Collins, and just when it looked like there might be a glimmer of hope for the Bears, Caleb Haney had to watch in shock as 340 pounds of man drops back into coverage and drops a killing blow with a pick 6 and an emote on the entire crowd. To his credit though, Caleb Haney still fought after the setback and gave the Packers a little scare before bowing out valiantly 14-21. With that, the Packers had officially made it to the Super Bowl, and waiting on the other side of the tunnel in Super Bowl 45 was Ben Roethlisberger and the Pittsburgh Steelers, who posed the greatest threat to Aaron Rodgers so far. See, against the Bears in the NFC Championship game, Aaron Rodgers finally looked mortal in the playoffs, as against the 4th best defense in the NFL, Rodgers had statistically the worst game that he had ever played up to this point, as he failed to throw for even a single touchdown. And now the Packers were set to face off against the Steelers, who sported the best defense in the league, led by All-Pros in James Harrison and every quarterback in Pat McAfee's nightmare, Troy Polamalu. But come on, at this point, Aaron Rodgers was used to the odds being stacked against him, as time and time again, he had proven everyone wrong, and this game would be no different, as in the first quarter, Rodgers found the ever-reliable Jordy Nelson to draw first blood, taking a 7-0 lead. And just like how it had gone all year long for the Packers, when the offense steps up, the elite defense does the exact same, as the ever-reliable Nick Collins picks off Weinstein and brings it to the house, leaping into the end zone to extend the lead to 2 possessions. So, things were going perfectly, but of course the football gods were aware of this and made sure the Packers had to at least suffer a little in order to touch the gold, and they paid with blood, as 2 very crucial pieces on the offense and defense in Donald Driver and Charles Woodson were both ruled out for the rest of the game, with separate injuries greatly damaging the Packers' chances. With those 2 injuries now in play, things seem to really start falling apart for the Packers, as despite Aaron Rodgers playing really well, his teammates were pretty much dropping everything thrown their way, and the Steelers now found themselves on the doorstep of the Packers' home, down by just 4 with a chance to take the lead. Remember, at this point, the Packers' leader, their most experienced player and team captain, Charles Woodson, was on the sidelines in a sling, and without Seawood making the calls on the field, the defense was lost, and nobody was more aware of that than the late Hall of Famer and Packers linebackers coach, Kevin Greene. Even as a coach, Greene spoke to Clay Matthews as the 3rd quarter faded into the 4th and delivered a speech that gave their sophomore star the exact confidence booster that he needed.
Everybody looks up to Wood as being a leader. He's gone. Nobody's standing up and rallying the troops. It is time. It is time.
Immediately after the speech, on the first play of the 4th quarter, Clay Matthews levels Rashad Mendenhall and forces a fumble to swing the momentum right back to the Packers. So in came Aaron Rodgers, in desperate need of a touchdown, and with all the pressure in the world on Rodgers, the man delivered, finding Greg Jennings for a huge score. But the Steelers just didn't die. And after scoring another touchdown and a 2-point conversion, this would be Aaron Rodgers' final test. 6 minutes on the clock, 4th quarter of the Super Bowl, 3rd and 10. And with everything on the line for Rodgers, in the biggest moment of his career, Rodgers fired the most perfect pass possible straight into the midst of Greg Jennings for 31 yards and a first down. Now, although the Packers would be stopped from scoring a touchdown, they were happy with a field goal and 4 minutes killed on the clock. So now, unfortunately, what will prove to be a luxury later on in this video, Aaron Rodgers went to the sidelines and had to rely on his defense to make one more play to end this game for good. 4th and 5, Roethlisberger drops back and fires an incomplete pass. Game over, season over. Aaron Rodgers is officially a Super Bowl champion and a Super Bowl MVP as the Green Bay Packers won their first Super Bowl under Aaron Rodgers and their 4th Super Bowl in franchise history. What a magical year, and although it did get a little bumpy at some points, the key takeaway from this Packers team was its overall balance, as they weren't over-reliant on their offense scoring a ton of points or their defense completely shutting down opposing offenses, but each side of the ball was able to come in clutch exactly when they needed to in order to get wins, even when the odds were against them. So at this point, in just his 3rd season in the NFL as a starter, Aaron Rodgers had done it all, as the man rightfully went after all his haters, dragging his nuts across their faces. But although all of this was great, with great success comes great expectations. And of course, when somebody this talented starts winning this early on, the question becomes whether or not the Green Bay Packers, led by Aaron Rodgers, could be the next dynasty to rule over the NFL. And you know, maybe this wasn't so far-fetched of an idea, because although the 2010 Packers went 10-6 on the season despite their injuries, this team never trailed by more than 7 points at any point in the season whatsoever. So maybe, just maybe, with some new guys coming in like Randall Cobb and some other sophomores taking massive leaps, alongside the current stars coming back to health on offense and defense, this 2011 Packers team had all the potential in the world to be even more frightening than the team they had just fielded that won a Super Bowl. And as the season began, that is exactly what happened.
From the 4, 5 options to 5. Rodgers surveys, sprints, throws, touchdown, Jordy Nelson.
Yep, if it weren't for one singular loss to the Chiefs and quarterback Kyle Orton, who had been cut earlier that same year, then this Green Bay Packers team would have gone undefeated to end the 2011 season. So I guess everyone was actually right about this Packers team being a dynasty, but maybe let's pump the brakes for just a second, and let's look at one good thing and one bad thing from this Packers season. And starting with the good thing, well, Aaron Rodgers. He was still pretty good at football. The English language does not have words that can convey just how much of an anomaly 2011 Aaron Rodgers was. The man could do no wrong this year, and without Brett Favre's shadow behind him or any narrative hanging over his head, Rodgers was a free man and broke almost every quarterback record there was to break this year on the road to his first of many MVP campaigns. However, the one very overlooked, disastrous event for this Packers team came in a Week 2 game against the Carolina Panthers, where on a routine play, Packers multi-year Pro Bowl safety and glue to the secondary Nick Collins fell to the ground and didn't get up. After the game, it was revealed that Collins suffered a really terrifying neck injury that not only would end the 28-year-old's season, but after this hit, Nick Collins, one of the most important pieces to the Packers' defensive core, would never play another game in the NFL again. And without Nick Collins out there alongside Charles Woodson, in just 1 year, the Packers' impenetrable defense fell from second in the league all the way down to 19th overall. And now this once unbeatable 15-1 monster seemed like at the very least they had 1 or 2 Achilles heels to take advantage of. So it was postseason time, and everyone expected business as usual for the Packers as, oh no, the New York Giants and Eli Manning in the playoffs. They now had to play against the same man who just 4 years prior basically birthed Aaron Rodgers' career in Green Bay by ending Brett's, while also defeating the undefeated Patriots in the process. But although that was true, the Packers were still overwhelming favorites at home, and when Aaron Rodgers was at his best, nobody could stop this Packers team whatsoever. But I guess there's only one way to find out how this game will go, and to start the game, it was pretty much neck and neck, with both teams exchanging a few touchdowns and field goals until with 15 seconds left on the clock, the Packers completely fell apart, allowing the Giants to run for 23 yards while getting out of bounds, which set up the biggest play in this entire game.
A 55-yard try from here, and now instead, they're going for it all. The pass is caught for the touchdown!
A Hail Mary. This call to throw a Hail Mary instead of a field goal really makes no logical sense, but who cares? It worked. And from there on out, this game was all Giants, as Aaron Rodgers, who only had 2 games on the entire regular season under a 95 passer rating, put up atrocious stats by this season's standards, and the Giants upset the 15-1 Packers 37-20 in their first and only playoff game of the season. This was pretty much just a full team loss, as the defense couldn't stop anything, the O-line gave up 4 sacks, and admittedly, Aaron Rodgers was struggling out there. But from here on out, things only will get worse and worse for the Packers. So you know, Green Bay fans, I just thought I'd give you a little friendly warning. With that out of the way, going into the 2012 offseason, the Packers had 3 needs. Improve the defense, filling the hole that Nick Collins left behind, add some real threats in the running game besides a team leading 578 yards from James Starks, and beef up an O-line that ranked around the 21st mark in the league last year. Basically put, the Packers needed to help Aaron Rodgers help them, and I guess they fixed like half of their problems at best by signing both Cedric Benson and Jeff Saturday, both in their last years in the NFL, and then added some solid contributors in the draft with late-round picks to continue to add talent to the roster for the future. So as we enter the 2012 season, this year turned out to be a career year for a normal QB, but I guess a below average one, dare I say, for Rodgers. And that was despite several injuries to his top weapons in Jordy Nelson and a pretty nasty torn abdominal muscle from Greg Jennings that held him out for 8 games. But all of this led to a Week 17 matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. If the Packers win, they get a first-round bye, and if the Vikings win, they would be in the playoffs. Also, it should be said that before this game, Adrian Peterson needed 208 yards on this day to break the all-time rushing record. So it was no surprise when the Vikings, led by AP, pounced on Green Bay and took an early 20-7 lead. And that was the story of the game, as basically the Packers got punched in the mouth early and couldn't overcome Adrian Peterson and, well, just Adrian Peterson, as yet another routine perfect Aaron Rodgers performance went to waste as the Packers lost the game to Minnesota and now had to play in the wild card. Alright, whatever, it is what it is, I guess. So what team was going to have to face the human guillotine that was Aaron Rodgers in the wild card? Well, the Minnesota Vikings, led by Joe Webb at quarterback. Need I say more? The game ended in just the first half, with Joe Webb harnessing the spirit of a prime Zach Wilson and lost the game 10-24. And with that, the Packers moved on to the divisional round where they would meet their first test. And I guess, allow me to introduce you to the antagonist of this story, from a certain point of view. If anything had been proven about Aaron Rodgers so far in his career, although he was great at everything, he was human and struggled against all-time great defenses, and unfortunately for him, this 2012 49ers unit was exactly that, as they were loaded with talent front to back and had the second best defense in the entire league. Add that small issue onto the fact that earlier in the regular season, the Packers had actually played against the 49ers and lost by just 8 points, except at the time, the 49ers had Alex Smith at quarterback, not Colin Kaepernick. So apparently, the Packers didn't even bother to change their game plan whatsoever, despite the massive quarterback change. And what resulted for the Packers was the worst defensive performance in franchise history.
2nd down and 4. Kaepernick keeps it. Fooled everybody. Colin Kaepernick. What a game. Touchdown.
The game at one point was actually close, but once the third quarter got about halfway through, it was all 49ers, as Kaepernick broke every quarterback rushing record there was to break, with the 49ers sending the Packers home in embarrassing fashion, dropping a steamy 45 whopper on Green Bay. This loss was humiliating. But remember, this Packers team had just won a Super Bowl 2 short seasons ago and still had Super Bowl DNA oozing throughout the team. So going into 2013, the Packers front office continued to make good moves. Yeah, I know, it's weird to see a competent front office in these kind of videos, but the Packers moved on from injured and aging guys like Greg Jennings and Donald Driver, thanked them for their service, and then replaced them with shiny new rookies on offense in Eddie Lacy and David Bakhtiari. And above all of these transactions, of course the Packers had to show their main man the appreciation he deserved and signed Aaron Rodgers, the savior of Green Bay, to a 5-year, $110 million contract. making Rodgers rightfully the highest paid player in the NFL. Besides that, the Packers also made it a priority to lock up Clay Matthews as well, and the rest of the offseason was pretty quiet, with Rodgers focusing on his successful acting career, and all signs were pointing at yet another godlike season from Rodgers and company. But as the 2013 season began, the Packers started off sluggish, as entering their bye week, the Packers held a mediocre 1-2 record, including a Week 1 loss to the very same team that steamrolled them just a few months prior. Although Aaron Rodgers was still his normal self on the field, for various reasons, people began to question his leadership qualities a little more than usual, pointing to former teammate Greg Jennings' comments on Rodgers and how Aaron choosing himself over the team might just ruin the whole season. But come on now, seriously, do I need to point out that the Packers were still quarterbacked by Aaron Rodgers? And immediately following their bye week, the Packers took advantage of a lighter schedule and won their next 4 games by an average of 11.5 points. But then, the entire season was stopped in its tracks when in a Week 9 game against the Bears, Aaron Rodgers broke his left collarbone, almost the same injury Charles Woodson had in their Super Bowl win, and Rodgers would miss the next 7 games for Green Bay. With Rodgers out until the final week of the season, the Packers predictably completely crumbled in his absence. But when he came back in Week 17 against none other than the Bears, the Packers just barely outlasted them once again off of an iconic 4th and 8 conversion to somehow find themselves in the wild card game once again. Basically just deja vu, because not only did they have to beat the Bears in Week 17 to even make the playoffs, but now waiting for them in the wild card was arguably the best team in the entire NFL in the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers were back, but unlike last year, this playoff game would be held on Packers territory in the frigid Lambeau Field. So maybe the home field advantage would be enough to slow down the hottest team in the entire league, who came into this game winning their last 6 straight. And you know what? It actually did help, as the entire game was as tight as a playoff game could be, with both teams matching each other score for score, one after the other, and whoever lost this game would be the team that made the first crucial mistake. So with the game tied at 20-all, with 4 minutes left in the 4th quarter, it looked like Aaron Rodgers and the Packers may be the ones to capitalize on the first major mistake, as Colin Kaepernick nearly threw an interception to rookie Micah Hyde, but it just wasn't meant to be. So with Aaron Rodgers on the sidelines, he had to watch his defense give up an opportunity to most likely win the game then and there, but they failed, and with that screw-up, the 49ers marched right down the field and converted a game-winning field goal, sending the Packers home 23-20. I'm getting some more deja vu. Weird. Anyways, this season under Aaron Rodgers could actually be seen as their least painful because they weren't really under Aaron Rodgers. And going into the next season, as long as A-Rod could stay healthy, a lot of people predicted the Packers to be in line for contention of another Super Bowl title. Once again, the Packers aced the 2014 NFL Draft, despite still not having any high draft picks at all, with the Packers coming home with Corey Linsley and Davatnae Adams, among other guys. And to add even more meat to the defense, the Packers were able to lure Julius Peppers away from Chicago and signed the Pro Bowl pass rusher to a brand new 3-year deal. New core, but still the same guy at the top. And just like usual, for some reason, to start the 2014 season, not only did the Packers start out slow, but I guess Aaron Rodgers himself did as well, as his stats were just a little bit less than perfect. So who's to blame for losses to both the Super Bowl champion Seahawks and the playoff-bound Detroit Lions? Well, Aaron Rodgers' girlfriend, of course. The wench is clearly holding him back, and once he ditches her, balance will be restored in Green Bay. But, you know, perhaps that wasn't the problem. And in 2014, Aaron Rodgers somehow maybe one-upped himself from 2011, and his 2014 campaign can be argued as maybe the best individual quarterback season in NFL history.
They try to
he did it again. Despite having a mid-defense, Aaron Rodgers did his usual thing, you know, just winning another MVP and breaking even more records while still having a girlfriend, which is unheard of. So although all of these stats were ridiculous, seriously, take a moment to appreciate this man's talent. But one singular game described 2014 Aaron Rodgers to me in a nutshell. It's Week 10, Sunday Night Football. Packers versus Bears. And the game was a blowout, with the Bears losing the game by 41 to their rightful leading shareholder per usual. But Aaron Rodgers finished the game with 6 touchdowns in the first half. The man tossed 6 of them things in the first half and decided the Bears weren't even worth his time in the second, as Rodgers was too disgusted with his opponent to even try to get the NFL record on that day after one attempt. So, with Aaron Rodgers mastering the quarterback position, the Packers ended their 2014 season winning 7 of their last 8 games, and with a 12-4 record, they finally got a taste of that sweet, sweet first-round bye. Everything was finally set in place for Green Bay to have a repeat of their magical 2010 season. But remember, happiness was a luxury for the Packers during this time, and going into their divisional round matchup with the fellow 12-4 Dallas Cowboys, Aaron Rodgers had been dealing with a torn calf muscle that he injured in Week 16 and then re-injured again in Week 17. So there were murmurings as to how Rodgers' mobility might be affected going into the postseason. And as the game began, it turned out that Rodgers was injured, and he looked like it too. But because Cowboys quarterback Tony Romo was also dealing with a hand injury of his own, these two old broken men offset each other, and with the Packers down by 4 and the Cowboys driving, somebody had to step up and save their injured warrior. And it turns out that savior would be the new acquisition in Julius Peppers, as the outside linebacker stripped the NFL's leading rusher DeMarco Murray, saving a touchdown and turning the momentum of this game inside out. So the Packers took advantage of this massive play by their new stud, and after the hobbled Rodgers threw a laser beam straight through the chest of Richard Rodgers, the Packers held a lead, and the controversy would officially begin. 4th down, 2 yards to go. The entire fate of the best season the Cowboys have had in years is relying on this one upcoming play. And Tony Romo decides to lob a 50-50 ball to their best receiver, Des Bryant, who dropped the ball? Maybe? Whatever actually happened, the Packers took advantage of this wild sequence and killed clock until Green Bay outlasted the Cowboys 26-21. So with that, the Green Bay Packers moved on to their first NFC Championship game since their Super Bowl season in 2010. At this point, they could practically taste the victory, and all they had to do was defeat the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Aaron Rodgers had already been stifled by elite defenses in the past, but now he had to go against the #1 ranked Legion of Boom unit on the road. And with Aaron Rodgers still nursing his calf injury from a week prior, many predicted a blowout in favor of Seattle. However, when the game began, although the Packers didn't look very good at all offensively with a still clearly injured Aaron Rodgers, the Seahawks were much worse, as both quarterbacks logged some of the worst first-half performances of their careers, as the Packers only held a 16-0 lead after blowing several opportunities to score 7 points instead of just 3. And for the most of the game from here on out, it was basically the same formula, where the Seahawks offense did some light cardio, while the Packers offense accomplished nothing in the meantime. But late in the 4th quarter, it looked like the Seahawks finally tripped over themselves for the final time when Danger Russell Wilson threw his 4th pick of the day to ice the game for Green Bay. Turns out the game wasn't iced, and directly after that play, I felt it was necessary to make a graph to show the 6-stage narrative arc of the Packers' truly unprecedented meltdown. And here we start with Morgan Burnett's interception on Russell Wilson, where he inexplicably fell to the ground rather than, deciding to move forward after getting an interception. So that was weird, and then eventually, the Packers' rock-solid defense caved in to allow the Seahawks' first offensive touchdown of the day on a Russell Wilson scramble to bring the game within a score. Now as we go up a little further, all the Packers had to do was recover one singular onside kick, and the game would be near mathematically over. But no, it just can't be that easy now, can it? Brandon Bostic's onside kick slip-up was devastating, as the Seahawks ended up getting the ball back immediately, and with momentum on their side, Marshawn Lynch scored a touchdown to take their first lead of the game. But somehow, there was even more after this. A mere 1-point lead was not enough, and the Seahawks needed to convert a crucial 2-point conversion. And through some form of divine intervention, they got it, with Russell Wilson heaving the rock to Luke Wilson, who watches Ha-Ha Clinton-Dix just give up on playing defense mid-play. So, even after Aaron Rodgers managed to get the Packers to overtime, the story was already written, and Russell Wilson found Jermaine Kearse for a walk-off 35-yard touchdown to send the Packers home one game shy of the Super Bowl. After that a small setback, the Green Bay Packers got ready to rally the troops and ride their god-tier quarterback to hopefully another year of broken records and maybe one game further than the NFC Championship. Except, these hopes were immediately put on hold in just the preseason. In just their second preseason game, Jordy Nelson caught a pass and went down to the turf with a non-contact injury, where it was later revealed that Jordy Nelson had sustained a torn ACL, and now Aaron Rodgers would be without his top receiver for the entire 2015 season. Well, damn, that sucks, but the show must go on, and outside of Jordy Nelson, the Packers stayed relatively healthy as Aaron Rodgers and the others on the team went 10-6 on the season, but due to dropping their final 2 games of the year, were once again forced to play in the wild card. But hey, unless it's exactly the 49ers waiting, then the Packers pretty much always annihilate whatever slab of meat is thrown their way. And that's exactly what they did, beating Washington 35-18 in a game that was never close, to advance to the divisional round for the 5th time under Aaron Rodgers, where the Arizona Cardinals, an old foe, had returned. If you can remember, in 2009, as we went over earlier, the Cardinals and Packers played in one of the most exciting games in playoff history, which resulted in a game-winning touchdown in overtime by the Cardinals. But now, over 6 years later, this was a different Aaron Rodgers. This was a veteran, multiple-time MVP and Super Bowl champion Aaron Rodgers. But none of that really matters when you're playing on the hard mode difficulty in real life. You see, although the Packers had stayed healthy during the regular season, in their blowout with Washington, Davatnae Adams would sprain his MCL, ruling him out for the Cardinals game, and even worse, in the first quarter of the Arizona game, Randall Cobb would also be ruled out for good with a bruised lung, leaving James Jones to be smothered by Patrick Peterson and 2 more no-name wide receivers in Jeff Janis and Jared Abbrederis to help lead the Packers to a potential victory. And early on, just like the Seattle game from last year, my god, this game was ugly, but in a fun way, as both offenses were turning the ball over constantly for completely different reasons. So, picture this. You're Aaron Rodgers, you're sitting on the sideline, right, and you have a 3-point lead with 3 minutes remaining. And then you think to yourself, wait a minute, we're winning with this little time left? And something has to go wrong, right? And then you look up at the scoreboard and see this.
Ball at the 9. Palmer fires and it's a touchdown! Get out of here!
Well, that can't feel too good. But then, luckily for Green Bay, after both teams screwed up offsetting their possessions, the Packers had one more chance, I guess, with a 4th and 20 inside Cardinals territory. I mean, what could possibly happen on this play that could change anything about this game whatsoever?
Here goes Rodgers again, all the way downfield, and it's going to be caught by Janis at the 35-yard line.
Okay, that was pretty cool, but there's no way he could do it again, especially...
They are going to bring pressure again. Rodgers is going to roll away, throws it up in the air, says a prayer, and Janis does not stop it. Oh, please.
Well, anyways, here we are again in overtime. Aaron Rodgers' destiny from this point on would be decided with a coin toss, and unfortunately, he lost, as the Cardinals would take full advantage of winning a 50-50, and Larry Fitzgerald would single-handedly put a machete straight through the hearts of Aaron Rodgers and Packers fans everywhere, as the Cardinals won the divisional game 26-20. This is getting ridiculous. Aaron Rodgers has continually just exceeded the limits of the human body itself, and the Packers have nothing to show for Aaron's blood, sweat, and tears. So going into 2016, something needed to change, or else things were going to get ugly very fast. And well, not only did things get ugly, but conversations surrounding Aaron Rodgers got straight up toxic, because although people were used to slow starts from Green Bay, at this point, after Week 11, the Packers found themselves getting blown out by Washington 24-42, and stood with a lowly 4-6 record. At this point, the media had seen enough. It had been 6 whole years since the Packers' last Super Bowl, and with a still good team on paper, all the blame went straight to Aaron Rodgers, as just about every talking head possible ripped into the man, saying he had been overrated for years at this point, and Rodgers is nowhere near the superstar that everyone believes he has been in the past. But here's the thing. During the Packers' worst point in the season, where they lost 4 straight games, Aaron Rodgers was still his normal self and more, with well over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and over a 100-plus quarterback rating. So, if it wasn't Aaron Rodgers' fault, then who really was to blame for the Packers' early failures? The defense of the Green Bay Packers had regressed so much since even just last year, as with age catching up to a lot of their key members, during this 4-game stretch, the Packers gave up 38 points per game to opposing offenses, and unfortunately these struggles seemed like they weren't going to end anytime soon. But although everyone seemingly lost hope in the season, one man stayed confident, and that man was Aaron Rodgers. And he was so confident, in fact, that he told the media that from here on out, the Packers can run the table, and he realistically saw a world where the Packers can win the NFC North, going 10-6 on the season. Now, if this were any other quarterback in the league outside of like maybe 2 or 3 guys, people would have just laughed at him. But this is Aaron Rodgers we're talking about. And immediately after he said that, what resulted was one of the most efficient quarterback stretches of play we've ever seen. Look, I'm not even gonna pretend to be surprised anymore. This is Aaron Rodgers, and this is what he does. The man willed his team without a single running back over even 500 yards to 6 straight wins to fulfill his own prophecy, clinching a playoff spot for the Green Bay Packers. With everyone not believing in them again, Green Bay did it. They actually ran the table. And now that the media narrative had completely done a 180 on Aaron in just a few weeks, there was now confidence in Rodgers, and especially more after they sank the boat of the New York Giants in a disgraceful 38-13 skewing in Lambeau Field. So after continuing their win streak, Aaron Rodgers and the Packers now faced their toughest challenge on the season, as the 13-3 Dallas Cowboys waited for them. This was a dangerous Dallas team led by 2 rookies in Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott, having fantastic individual seasons, and this squad actually handed the Packers a steamy L earlier in the season. So this game would be a completely different environment than what it was just 3 years prior. As the game began, it was all Packers, with the young Cowboys proving no match for the war-hardened Rodgers and company as Green Bay ran out to a dominant 28-13 lead before it was completely erased by the Dak to Dez Bryant connection, which actually ended up tying the game at 31-31 late in the fourth quarter with momentum on Dallas's side. So here we are for like the 6th time already. Mere seconds on the clock. Tie game, 3rd and 20 after a sack, with 1 timeout remaining. Aaron Rodgers has the ball in his hands with the odds stacked against him, and a miracle being his only way out of this situation, and of course, Aaron Rodgers stayed calm and did his thing.
Rodgers spins to his left. Comes underneath and the pass is incomplete, out of bounds. Now they say complete. It is good!
Unbelievable. Aaron Rodgers pulled another rabbit out of his ass, and the Packers, who at one point were 4-6, defeated the second best team in the NFL record-wise. And although they would go on to get blasted in the NFC Championship game against the MVP-led Matt Ryan Falcons, this was the first year since 2010 where it looked like the Packers under Aaron Rodgers had surpassed their expectations in the playoffs. So, with the horizon looking bright from here on out, of course, the complete opposite would happen. As from 2017 to 2018, the dark years under Aaron Rodgers would occur, as a broken collarbone would derail the Packers' entire 2017 season from Rodgers, and another Aaron injury would plague him in 2018, as well as the rest of his team not exactly playing up to their standards. But just before the 2018 season concluded, the Packers decided to once and for all fire their longtime Super Bowl winning head coach, Mike McCarthy, a decision that many felt was years in the making, and replaced him with the relatively unproven Matt LaFleur to see if he could siphon any more talent left in Aaron Rodgers in his twilight years. But before we begin the 2019 season, over this time skip, we got some new faces and some old ones that improved greatly also, as the Packers now finally had a competent running game led by Aaron Jones as well as new blood to lead the defense. But most importantly, the once young Davatnae Adams had now blossomed into one of the best receivers the league had to offer, and his connection with Aaron Rodgers had grown near unbreakable with experience. And to add even more talent, the new general manager in Green Bay was tossing around every dollar he could to keep Aaron Rodgers satisfied, bolstering up the defense with multi-year deals to Zadarius Smith to replace Clay Matthews and Adrian Amos, among other great free agency signings. But remember, at this point, Aaron Rodgers hadn't made the playoffs in 3 seasons, and maybe at the age of 36, Rodgers just won't be the same player anymore under a new offensive mind, and the critiques of his team's past failures still hadn't escaped the perception of him going into the future. Although a lot of these critiques were stupid, questions about how Rodgers would gel with his new coaches seemed legit, but of course, at this point, Aaron Rodgers had proven he is an NFL legend, and if you give him weapons, he'll do the rest, as Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers went 13-3 during the 2019 season, their best record since 2011. So the Packers were good again, but why? Well, obviously there were a ton of different reasons, but the 2 main ones were Aaron Rodgers, believe it or not, and the defense, as for the first time since their 2010 Cinderella run, the Green Bay Packers had a top 10 ranked defense, which meant that Aaron Rodgers didn't have to drop 40 every night to give the Packers a fighting chance. But at this point, the regular season was more of an afterthought for Aaron Rodgers, as his eyes were glued on getting back to another Super Bowl, and after dispatching the Seahawks in the divisional round in a tight-ish 28-23 contest, Aaron Rodgers trembled. He now once again had to face his greatest adversary, as the man had to take on his favorite team growing up in the San Francisco 49ers. Now, in past years, people would see that Aaron Rodgers had to play against the 49ers and would just chalk that up as a Niners win. But this time, things would be different, as Dom Capers was gone and replaced with an entirely new defensive coaching staff and players. So even though Colin Kaepernick broke every quarterback rushing record against them all those years back, nothing like that would ever happen. How? Okay, look, although Aaron Rodgers obviously could have done way more in this game, especially in the first half, just like their matchup against Kaepernick, the Packers defense looked woefully underprepared for the 49ers run game, as Raheem Mostert did whatever he wanted when he wanted, as the 49ers stomped all over the Packers, with Jimmy Garoppolo attempting a grand total of 8 passes. It happened again. Even though the 49ers passed on Rodgers all those years ago in the draft, even though Aaron Rodgers himself was a 49ers fan growing up, and even though the 49ers have embarrassed Aaron Rodgers time and time again for reasons, he just couldn't overcome the Niners. But maybe if the stars align, he'll get another opportunity. But for now, we gotta look ahead to the 2020 season, where people expected the Packers to be good, but people really just wanted to see what they could do in the playoffs. But in 2020, not only were the Packers good, but they were great, as Aaron Rodgers went from being the most efficient quarterback in the NFL to the deity of efficiency itself, as he led the Packers to another 13-3 season, casually won the MVP, and once again, just take a gander at these stats. This is not something that normal quarterbacks do on a yearly basis. So this was supposed to be the year. The Packers once again held the #1 seed in the NFC, slaughtered the hobbled Rams in the divisional round, and got yet another opportunity to make a Super Bowl appearance in the NFC Championship game. And who would be waiting for them? Well, none other than the one and only. Well. Thomas Brady versus Aaron Rodgers. A matchup that the Packers are probably happy to see, because any team that isn't the 49ers is a good thing. But this Tampa Bay team would be no easy feat, as their defense was elite from top to bottom, as well as an offense that was just now finding their footing late in the season. So the game went underway, and early on it was dead even, with Rodgers and Brady going back and forth, just daring the other to make the first mistake. But these were the two best teams the NFC had to offer, so tiny slip-ups weren't going to be easy to come by, until just before halftime and spilling into the third quarter, the Packers made 3 costly mistakes that swung the pendulum of this game into the Bucs' favor for good. First, with seconds remaining in the second quarter, Sean Murphy-Bunting makes a play on the ball and picks off Aaron Rodgers, which seemed to not lead to anything at all, as with just 8 seconds left on the 40, the Bucs could only do so much, until Kevin King got toasted by Scotty Miller on a Hail Mary play to end the first half. Absolutely brutal, but something the Packers had seen before, so Aaron Rodgers knew just how important it would be to go down the field and get points immediately in the third quarter, and, well, on the Packers' first drive, Aaron Jones coughed up the ball right back to the Bucs, who scored a touchdown to take a commanding 28-10 lead. And just like that, 3 miscues dug the Packers into a ditch they couldn't climb out of, as despite Aaron Rodgers playing an overall incredible game, it just wasn't enough. And when the Packers elected to kick a PAT rather than go for it on 4th and goal, they sealed their fate. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers advanced to the Super Bowl, beating Green Bay 31-26, as Aaron Rodgers once again fell in heartbreaking fashion. So now, this was it, the 2021 NFL season. The last year where the Green Bay Packers would be considered contenders under Aaron Rodgers. And with even more key additions to the team in All-Pro linebacker Devondre Campbell and Aaron's safety blanket returning in Randall Cobb, the Packers' last dance would occur, as for the 3rd year in a row under Matt LaFleur, the Packers won 13 games and cruised to another first-round bye, with Aaron Rodgers continuing to play on a level so high that we've just become numb to it, as the man won his 4th MVP at the age of 38 and added even more nonsensical plays to his legendary career highlight reel. But although I'd love to go more in depth on this season, nobody really cared at the time and nobody really cares in hindsight. All people wanted to see was Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers do something in the playoffs and end the torment of their fans and relieve their heartbreak. And you know, what better way to do that than to have the Green Bay Packers play in the divisional round against their greatest enemy in the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers were back, but unlike a few years ago, this playoff game would be held on Packers territory in the frigid Lambeau Field. I've already said this before, but whatever. Maybe, just maybe, this game might be different than the last 3 times these teams squared off against one another. And you know, many people predicted exactly that, mainly due to the fact that the Packers were just way more talented, and earlier this season had beaten the 49ers on the road mainly due to the heroics of Aaron Rodgers individually. So, will things really be different this time around? Well, at least it looked better early on, as the MVP elegantly slashed through the 49ers defense on their opening drive, and then the defense did its job on the other side of the field as well. Once again, things looked to be going well for Rodgers, until their momentum was murdered by a fumble, and even though it took almost the rest of the first half to get something going, when he finally did, the special teams let him down, and his efforts amounted to nothing. And as the game went on, this 49ers defense dared Rodgers to throw to the flats and pressured him all game long, and because of that, those opportunities to score just barely happened, and one more special team screw-up eventually tied the game at 10-10 late in the 4th. Where now, here we are, the Packers' final drive. 3 minutes and 40 seconds left on the clock. Tie game, 10-10, 3rd down and 11. So Aaron Rodgers takes the snap and looks down the field and throws an incomplete pass to a double-teamed Davatnae Adams, missing a wide-open Allen Lazard in the process. And with that screw-up, the 49ers took full advantage and did exactly what they had done in 2013 and won the game on a walk-off field goal in Lambeau Field. Just like that, Aaron Rodgers' Super Bowl window was closed forever in Green Bay, as in 2022, the Packers failed to even make a playoff appearance after a loss to the Lions in Week 18. And later in the offseason, the Green Bay Packers officially ended the Aaron Rodgers era of 15 years by trading him to the Jets. The exact same thing they did with Brett Favre all those years ago. So just like that, Aaron Rodgers left the Green Bay Packers only winning 1 Super Bowl, but maybe that's not such a bad thing, and as we've gone over, Super Bowls are truly rare, and factors like injuries, matchups, and even luck greatly impact a team's chances of winning the big game. So maybe we should appreciate Aaron Rodgers more for his breathtaking talent and legendary run in Green Bay, instead of criticizing him for everything he wasn't. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, then subscribe, because I got a lot of videos on the channel just like this one, and if you like this video, then you should probably watch this video right here, where I went over exactly how the Texans became the worst organization in the league today. It's pretty good, trust me. Anyways, until next time.